Greetings and welcome to CIBER Focus, your source for international business information. I'm Nick Sterne and I'm here today with Sridhar, Kollipara, and Michael Gassman, who spent the summer working on a project in Ghana. Guys, thanks for joining me.
No.
So first, I was wondering if you could give the viewers a brief overview of how the summer deployments work. Like what the timeline is, how you got involved.
Sure. So summer deployments, like they call it as challenging deployments, so they do not give you a lot of information before you start the projects, either intentionally or unintentionally because the projects are not finalized by that point. So this was around July time frame when we were told that we have some projects lined up and if we would be interested, and we were chosen of course from student group of people who wanted to do it. Then we were not told where we will be going. There were a couple of countries in the list, but they did not mention which countries we would be going. So I was curious. I'm sure Michael was curious as well, like which country we would be visiting. I was already opening the world map and seeing like where I would be going, and I was interested to see that. Then I think couple of weeks before we actually start traveling, they told us that okay, the project would be in Ghana and we have to get our passports and visas, everything ready. So within couple of weeks, we got all the passports and visa stuff ready. And the day before or 2 days before we left over the weekend for Ghana, we were actually given the project scope about what the project was. So it was very interesting because we didn't even know what the project was, and within next 48 hours we had to take a flight and get to the country. So that was definitely interesting. We both exchanged a couple of emails about how we want to tackle it, do some basic research and stuff. So that was the initial experience. And so just to give a brief about the project, so most of the non-profit organizations are moving towards moving away from the traditional funding sources towards more of social enterprise, what you call it as self-financial sustainability projects. So this was one of them, that NGO called Challenging Heights in Ghana. They wanted to do some financial sustainability measures and see if they could turn around a project to create financial income to support their operating expenses. We both were there to do some primary research, talking to the potential customers and find out if the business model was viable.
So I was wondering if you could talk a little about some of the challenges you found with operating a for-profit business in Ghana.
Yeah, there's entrepreneurship and just kind of doing business is kind of it's a newer thing. It's kind of like, it's been around for a while, but the process where people kind of starting to develop businesses is kind of new. And I think one of the challenges is there's this sort of sense of things are given to Africans. They kind of get this sense of like everything's been kind of donation based for a long time. And so it's kind of switching their mindset of things are provided to things can become self-sustaining. And so I think that's the biggest challenge of switching the people we worked with, their minds to this sort of model of you work and it produces things and then it can kind of like gain momentum. And so that was the biggest challenge I kind of felt like we encountered.
Yeah, I totally agree with Mike. The couple of challenges were like the time sensitivity. Of course, the western part of the world, they are right on time and they want to get things done faster. There are cultural differences in Africa that people are a little more laid back and relaxed, and like they might show up 1 hour late to the meeting. So we should not be offended because, I mean, Mike and I have been in the classroom learning for a while and we understand the cultures there. So it was not a big surprise, but yeah, there was like the approach of doing things was a little different in Africa when compared to the Western world.
So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what the business Challenging Heights was trying to set up.
Sure.
Yeah, so Challenging Heights is currently a school, essentially, and it's where it's to provide education to this small fishing village, Winneba. And so on the back end, they also do rescues of children that are slaves. So there's a big lake in Volta. Lake Volta is this huge lake, man-made, dammed-up lake in Ghana, and children are sold by their parents to the fishermen on this lake. And so they have these rescues. It's illegal, but it still occurs, and they do these rescues, and they get these kids, they bring them back to their the center. It's what was
Howdy House.
The Howdy House, and so it's like essentially a kind of a halfway home for these kids to kind of like adapt back to being on land, adapt to there being rules, adapt to kind of that type of life. And so this business on the side, when they built it, they had all these brick making machines, these like cement blocks essentially, and they're very rudimentary, like just the very basics of building. And they had these machines left over, and the idea was, can we still use these machines to make blocks and then sell these blocks in the market because there's a new influx of money in the country and people are starting to build houses and second floors and things. And so the idea was, could we come in and look at their model, evaluate the prices of cement and things, all these things, that their inputs, and basically kind of evaluate, can they make money? Because right now they weren't sure, but they were just selling bricks, making bricks, and we had no idea if they were losing money or making money. And so the idea was this would provide enough income to support the Hubdy House.
So I'm curious, in the end, did you guys come to the conclusion that that would be a sustainable source of income for them?
So our outcome of extensive analysis of doing on-ground research, and especially the inflation rates in Ghana are high, and cement is a commodity, and there was a lot of competition there were bigger players who were making cement blocks. Considering all the external factors and based out of the primary research, we realized that the business model was viable, it was profitable, it will make some money, but the goal to set up that business was to create at least 50% to cover at least 50% of the operational costs of that shelter. But based on our research, we found out that in best case scenario we could only cover 20%, and in worst case scenario we might just break even. So in a realistic scenario we would cover only 10% of the operational costs, and the business needed little more investment of buying a vehicle for the salesperson and hiring salespeople, and how much management's attention was required on the business. So we gave the recommendation to those people that this is what the viability of the business model is, and the latest I have heard is probably they would not proceed with the business model, like they might look for other business models to operate.
Well, it sounds like an extremely challenging project, especially given the time frame. I'm wondering what made you two want to get involved with the summer deployment.
Well, I think definitely there is a huge importance of global education at Kelly, and I personally, and I'm sure Mike would agree as well, that all these global opportunities are excellent opportunities for one, your personal learning, and two, whenever if you want to grow up the ladder in either corporate or anywhere, I think global exposure is very important. And having a social enterprise touch to this actually created a lot of interest personally in me, that I would be able to help an NGO. So I'm doing a business modeling for them, but at the end of the day, it is creating impact to the poor children and the children being rescued in the developing economies like Africa and Ghana. So I felt very fascinated that if I get involved in this and if I could do some kind of contribution, it would be create a lot of happiness for me both personally and professionally. So I think that's how I would say why I was involved in this.
For me, I think my reasons are a little less altruistic. I love to travel and I love to, meet new people, and I like doing the business part. And so I think if I could design the perfect job for me, it would be something where I would go to a country for a month and then go to a new country for the next month. And so to me, it's like, this is great. I get to go. They pay for all the expenses, and I get to go to Africa. Now, yes, I do work, but if that's what it costs me is my time, that's great, because I'm having a great experience and learning a lot of new things and really kind of putting to work the things that I've been learning here since I've been at school and actually applying them. So it's like, it's one thing to say things in a classroom and this is the way to do, but when you get over there, like, I actually have to make this decision, and so it kind of adds it's real, and there's a greater sense of realism when you're doing that.
I'm wondering if there are any experiences you had in country that really kind of kept with you, kind of stand out in your mind that you'd be willing to share.
I have one. We on the weekend we went to this like national park type things, like a rainforest. We were driving, and while you're there, the cabs can only carry like 4 or 5 people, or no, it's 5 people including the driver, and we had 6 people in the car. But the guy didn't care. But there are police checkpoints, and so we'd go around the bend. We'd park. One guy would get out. He'd walk through the police checkpoint. We'd drive through. He kind of checks everything. We'd go around the corner, and then our guy, whoever it was that time, would have jumped out, would then join us. And we're waiting. We get around the corner. We're like, we don't know, because these guards are carrying AK-47s and stuff. We're like, it's a little scary. But it's totally safe. There's never really even been war in Ghana. But so it's just for protection. And we're waiting. We have cell phones, so we call this guy. We're like, Adam, where are you? Like, what's taking so long? He goes, uh-oh, the guy with the gun's coming. Oh, I gotta call you back. And then he closes. We're like, what's going on? We don't know what's happening. And then finally he shows up. We're like, what happened? He goes, oh, the cop just wanted to be Facebook friends. And I was like, well, all that with this gun, and we're freaking out, and the guy just wants to be Facebook friends. It's just like totally disarms your thoughts of like, these aren't scary guys. Everyone wants to be friends.
I was not so much surprised with that because I'm originally from India and it's pretty common to do this kind of stuff in India. So I was not big surprised, but yes, it was a definitely interesting thing that happened. I think there were not one thing which I could point out, but there were at least a couple of things which was surprised or was interesting to me. There was I somehow was not very comfortable traveling to Africa. I felt it might be a little bit unsafe. I didn't know. I mean, all you read in the news is what you know. I haven't traveled ever to Africa, so I was little worried. But the people there were really, really genuinely nice. Everyone wants to talk to you. They're like very friendly. I think it was a very good experience there. And about the availability of resources, again, I was not expecting a lot of hi-fi, Wi-Fi, or internet and all those things. Like a small guest house where we were living, they had Wi-Fi which was working absolutely great. So I think I'm very pleasantly surprised with the level of improvement and the development happening in the country. So we were living in a guest house where the road was being constructed, and we were there for 2 weeks. By the end of 2 weeks, the road was fully constructed. I come from India and I know it takes ages to complete a road of that size. So I was really impressed with the level of how fast the things were developing in Ghana.
That's great. Now I'm wondering if there were any certain lessons from a business perspective that it really drove home for you for you throughout the project.
For me, I think it was sort of, you have to adapt to the speed of business that occurs, and there really is a speed that occurs here and occurs in other countries, and so you can't go into that at the same, like MBA, like 2 days before that, or we were in our internships working, and we're like, we're gung ho. I'm going through all my projects and going over it like real kind of hardcore to get there, and it's literally going at about a tenth the speed that it is here, let alone us coming from that. So it was really a big adjustment, and you can't just go into these things thinking that I'm going to go and get everything done and I'll get to use everything I know and show these people how this works. And it's not like that, because you get there and you're just like, yeah, I'll meet you tomorrow at noon. Okay, you get there at noon. He's not even in this town anymore. He left. He went back to the capital city. So it's kind of like you just have to adjust, and that's kind of the biggest thing. You have to be dynamic, I feel like.
I agree, and like just to add upon what Mike said, there is a lot of ambiguity in how the things are done. There is not a lot of data available on internet. Like we were trying to find the miles per gallon for a truck, and we could not figure out. Like we had to ask so many people to figure out what would be the miles per gallon for the truck. We could not find a lot of information online. So if we want to buy a used car, this like what would be the depreciation and everything. So there were a lot of aspects of business special to finance or accounting and business processes, which might not exactly translate from the US directly to Africa. So there are a few things which you have to adapt to the country about how the prices of gas could rise. Like, I mean, sure, there is inflation in the price of gas here as well, but there every day it could change. The prices of cement could change every day. There is not a lot of market efficiency there, so there is a lot of ambiguity is what I would say in doing business there.
All right. Well, so it sounds like you guys spent a lot of time working on the project. I was wondering if you had any additional time to check out some of the sites in Ghana.
Yeah, so while we were there on the weekends and in the evenings, we were able to, check out the town that we were in, but there wasn't really a whole lot to do. So a quick little taxi ride, they call them trotros, which is basically 50 people slammed into a van. It's not safe, and back doors are roped together, and I can look outside and see the highway. It was kind of scary. But we got over this town, Elmina. We got to see some of the slave castles where people were actually, slaves were captured and transported out through the Dutch and the British and the English, it was very surreal going to see these places. And so while we were there, we got to do a tour with some of the locals and some of the students we were with. And it was then that they're going down the list of the women had to do this, the men were this, and this is what happened to the women. And you're just kind of feeling like a horrible person. You're thinking, I don't want to be a white guy in the middle of this crowd of all these local Ghanaians that are getting kind of worked up. And the guy was very good at being an emotional speaker. And right after that, an old lady came up and slapped me across the face and yelled at me. So I thought that was probably deserved. I just kind of chalked it up and I said, okay, and walked away. And that was kind of an interesting experience. But we also got to see some of the ecological parts too, like the rainforest and the beach, and got to see just the beautiful country that is, and also the capital city.
And tried some Ghanaian food. Like I'm sure Mike liked a lot of Ghanaian stuff. So they don't eat a lot of vegetarian stuff. I am a vegetarian, so I struggled a little bit to figure out what I'm eating and what I'm not eating. but I think it was different experience. Like we went to some Western restaurants in when we were in the capital, and but we did go to smaller restaurants of local in a village. So it was a wide range of experiences, and definitely given a chance, I would go back to Africa. I'm currently working on a project for Botswana. It's a different country in Africa. I don't think the scope of the project requires us to travel to Botswana, but given an opportunity, I would definitely go back.
My biggest takeaway for that would be I would definitely go back given the opportunity. There's a lot of places I'd want to go explore further. But I also thought it was so safe that my mom likes to travel, and I was like, I could feel comfortable having my mom go to Ghana by herself and travel on her own. Like I totally felt safe with that. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Michael, Sridhar, thanks so much for joining me.
So, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
That's all for this edition of CIBER Focus. If you have any questions or suggestions for future topics, please contact us at ciber@indiana.edu.